to the Global Equipping Center's Executive Coaching Program. This is a very dynamic session, and what we're going to be talking about is conflict resolution. Conflict resolution. When you think about conflict, what's some of the first things that first enter into your mind? When I think of conflict, I think most people don't enjoy that concept. In fact, a lot of people run from that idea, and many people have left great jobs not because there wasn't a great vision or a great purpose or maybe a good product or service, but they had a problem with one person in a 1,000-person organization, and that problem became such a huge issue that they actually left the company. When you think of conflict, who's the first person that enters into your mind? Is it personally or is it professionally? And what are you doing to solve the problem? You see, conflict resolution in business affects your bottom line. If you have positive conflict, you will actually become more creative and be more productive in your business. However, if there's negative emotional conflict, what will happen is your productivity will go down, your motivation will go down, and many people even leave their own company because of the conflict that's been created, because they actually didn't take that conflict and learn how to cope with it and learn how to actually solve it. So what we're going to be discussing is how to actually implement 5 different conflict styles in your personal and professional walk so that you can become more effective and efficient as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, or as an executive. Let's look at one of our quotes. Change brings uncertainty, fear, and discomfort, which is fertile ground for conflict. So, why is conflict so challenging? We want to talk about this challenge, and here's what the challenge is most people have never been trained in how to deal with conflict personally or professionally. So when you think about conflict and you think about 2 people having a problem with each other, was there ever a course you took in high school that said, we're going to teach you about how to deal with conflict with other people? Or maybe in college, was there a conflict resolution course? Or maybe you heard something from somebody else and they said, here are the 5 ways how you can deal with conflict. Where were you trained in conflict resolution? And you would think that something so basic we would be trained in as individuals, but we haven't been. And therefore the problem is that people don't know what to do with it. It's kind of like that white elephant under the rug. Everyone knows it's there. Everybody just kind of walks around it and nobody wants to deal with it. And we're going to deal with it in this session of how to actually train you in such a way that you can use conflict for your benefit. Now, we want to talk about the difference between negative and positive conflict before we get started. Now, what we're going to talk about is something called provocative conflict. And provocative conflict is this. Here you are, and here's the other person you're having conflict with. Provocative conflict teaches that you can mentally have conflict in between each other, and this is mental. Mental conflict is provocative conflict. It is, how do you disagree with another person in such a way that you raise up an issue of disagreement, and as you discuss intensely and disagree with the other person, you actually develop brilliant solutions. So this is for the best of both individuals and the company as well. So provocative conflict is mental conflict, and that's positive. Many times when I talk to a client in our executive coaching program or provide business consulting in a company, I will ask very provocative questions to actually knock the people off a little bit and to try to discover what they really believe. Why are they doing what they're doing? And the reason why I do that is because if the person isn't 100% clear that this is what they should be doing, when things don't work out very well, they'll actually doubt themselves. They'll doubt their methods. But if I can actually prove to them that this is the right thing to do and they're 100% sold, then we can make it happen. Now, just like there is positive mental conflict, which is about a topic, a disagreement, there's also something which is negative. And this is a conflict which is emotional. And emotional conflict is the negative side of conflict. When you think about negative conflict, what you think is it's no longer mental about the topic, now it becomes personal. And when that happens, people become demotivated and unproductive. Because now it's not about the company or what's best for the other person. Now I'm actually attacking them personally because of their belief system. And when this happens, the entire organization begins to go down in their culture. Because who wants to work in a culture that has negative emotional conflict? So when we talk about how to train in provocative conflict, how to train you in practical steps in conflict, one of the questions we want to ask you is, who is the best person to create mental provocative conflict with you to get you to be more creative about your business? And number two, who's the person that creates the negative emotional conflict, and why do you have them in your life? Because these people drain you and make you less productive. These people excite you, and as you discuss with them, you come up with brilliant solutions to your problems. This is what grows your company. This is what actually stagnates your company. So where are you at, and where's your team? Number two, if you don't know the rules for the conflict game, then how will you know whether or not you have succeeded? There are rules to every game. There are rules for mental conflict, and there are rules for emotional conflict. It's like playing the game of chess with your company. If somebody sat across from you and said, I'd like to play chess with you, and you said, okay, I'm going to win, and the person says, oh, really, do you play chess a lot? And you said, well, actually, no, this is my first game. You're not going to win. You're going to take your rook and just go over here and attack his king and jump over everyone. And they're going to say, that's not how you play. A rook has to go in a certain 7 this way or this way. And no, I don't want to play that way. I'm making up my own rules. Well, you can't do that in business. You can't make up your own rules. There are rules of conflict engagement. And if you know what those rules are, you actually know how to win the game. And you know what the game is? The game is to have conflict mentally with as many people as you possibly can to help your company to be creative. That's one of the rules of the game. And the other rule of the game is to decrease the emotional tension in your organization so that people feel that they can be entrepreneurial regardless of the size of your company. People don't come to work to get in an emotional state in which they get upset and go home early to go away from your company. That's not why they joined. So we're going to talk about these kinds of conflicts, and you need to know what the rules of the game are. So whenever you have conflict with somebody in a positive way in which you disagree with them, don't ever attack them or feel attacked by them. Just disagree with them. And if you feel threatened by their mental attack on your topic, then make sure you never become emotional about it. Keep it in your mind. Don't let it go to your heart. Number three, the number of changes. This is a very important concept. The number of changes, the size of the change, and the surprise of the change. These are the three areas that create conflict in people constantly. So I want you to imagine that you're a business owner and you have a staff of 10. And you say to your team, hey, this Friday we're going to have a staff meeting. And comes Thursday afternoon and you decide, you know what, we're actually going to go away for the weekend on Saturday and Sunday. And everybody's up in arms because everybody's already had plans, and we said we're going to do it on Friday. And then you show up with the bus, and half of the people are there because the other people couldn't get people for childcare. And then on Monday you said, listen, we're going to start with a new project. And everybody's like, we're in the middle of 5 new projects. We got to get done with that. I understand that, but we'd also like to build an airplane in our private time. We're going to build an airplane for the company together. Think about this. If you change too many things constantly, what you do is you create internal conflict in your team. That's number one. Number two, it's the size of the changes that you make that can demotivate your team. If you make a significant change, and it's really huge, and it's about the vision or the strategy or a huge project that you're gonna cut, or you're gonna start something new, you want to make sure that you seed your team in enough time to give them emotional a latitude, a platform before you share with them a big change. Because people don't like change. And if you change too many little things or something really big, and it's too often, you start to actually devalue change in your own organization. So be careful that you don't change too many things and too many big things. And lastly, you don't want to change and surprise people. People love surprises if they're birthday parties. People like surprises which are presents. People don't like surprises when you change their parking spot. They don't like things that they don't know that's coming. And if you always parked here because your name was on the ground and it says David Wilkinson and I come in and now it's Fred Smith, I'm going to be upset because I'm used to parking in this space. I don't have to think anymore because I have to park in this space. Where did my space go? And now I'm all upset with my day because I don't know where my parking space went. And so when you think about how people are with routine, don't surprise them with change that leads to conflict. You want to surprise them in a good way, but don't surprise them and decide that somebody else gets their office and on Monday when they walk in, they have to go find their new office somewhere else. That's not what they're looking for when they join your company. So, change is challenging and it is complicated. So, we're going to talk about now the conflict curve because there's a lot of conflict and you need to see the progression of conflict of how it actually starts and how it ends. So we're going to be talking about a bell curve here and what it feels like. There are going to be 4 parts to this conflict. And if you look at your notes, it's going to be the 4 phases. So the first phase is going to be disagreement. Disagree. Disagree. And this is about topics. Let's say you have a new employee, a new follower that you've just brought into the company. And you're trying to build loyalty into this follower long time. And you disagree about a lot of topics with this employee, and the employee disagrees with you about a lot of the value system that you have. If time goes on, what happens is that the loyalty is not able to actually connect with the person because they say, I don't have much in common with you. You know, sometimes it's okay if you actually don't want to connect with somebody. If you don't agree with any of the major value systems that they have, it may not be a person you want to spend time with. And that's okay. But we're talking about now of a person who maybe has been with the organization a long time, and you're trying to build loyalty into them. Now, if you continue down the path, what takes place second is if there isn't any agreements, you become dissatisfied. Now, this means that all of your disagreements, they're not able to be actually fixed. And now you're starting to have some relationship issues inside the organization. And when a person becomes dissatisfied where they work, it goes from a mental disagreement into emotional frustration. And that's the key word I want you to write down, is frustration. When a person becomes dissatisfied where they're at, they have a hard time seeing the silver lining around the dark cloud. They become frustrated inside the organization, which means every time they come into the organization, they become frustrated within it. And therefore, they look at their job and they're like, I'm frustrated in this job. Why aren't we progressing? Why can't we move quicker? Why is there so much red tape? Or whatever problems that they have have been dissatisfied for such a long time that they become emotionally frustrated that there hasn't been a breakthrough. Now, you can actually find where a person is based upon something called an evaluation. When somebody is disagreeing with me, I ask the question, is it okay if they disagree with me? Yes. Is there any way I can bridge the gap and fix that so that we can actually find some topics that we agree on? Yes. If they say, I'm dissatisfied with your organization, I want it changed, I want to fix, I find out what are they exactly frustrated on. When they say everything, that's not true. Nobody's frustrated about everything. They're frustrated about very specific things, and that's called evaluation. So tell me, what 3 things would you change about our company? That's great. I would change this, this, and this. Guess where they're frustrated? In that, and that. So don't just actually say, well, I'm going to make up, I think they're frustrated here. Ask them. They will tell you, here's 1, 2, and 3. Here are the 3 things that I'm most frustrated with that you should fix. Now, if these actually don't get solved, there's something right here. This is the tipping point. There is a conversation or an event that takes place that the person goes beyond the point of no return. And if you look at your notes, the third fill-in, this is when the person begins to become disloyal. When I say disloyal, I don't see this in a negative connotation. How I'm looking at this is that the person can no longer give their loyalty to the person because they can no longer trust them. Because this disagreement and dissatisfaction has gone on so long and has not been changed that the person gives up hope that that relationship or that position, that organization will ever change. You know, for me, this is a very big value, this issue of disloyalty. Being disloyal to someone else. And I remember in Dallas, Texas, I was in a nonprofit organization, and I was there for 8 months, and the company was thriving. I had my own division, and we were really, really growing. And what happened was the co-owners came in one day, sat us all down as managers, and said, we want to know if you want to start another branch. And all of us managers said no. And so we gave our own reasons why this wasn't a good time. And what the co-owner said, well, we've already made it the decision, and we're going to be starting another branch in 4 weeks, so buck up and get it done. And by the end of the day, they had my resignation. And they were shocked. And they said, how can you leave us? We're about to explode. Look at all the things that you're doing. This is amazing. And I said, because I can't trust you. How can your whole team say this is not what we feel like we're supposed to do right now? We don't disagree with it. It's just the wrong time. We need a little bit more time to fix some of these current foundational problems, and you're going to go ahead. I can't serve you anymore. I don't trust you. I don't trust you have my best interests at heart. And I walked out because I made the decision that if I ever cross this point, I won't stay with the person or the organization because I'm not going to stay there and be disloyal. So disloyal means I can't think positively about you. The word is blame. And blame is a coping mechanism because you really are disappointed after this tipping point of the conflict. You're disappointed that you've become disloyal. You really believed this time would be different. This time's going to be better. And when it isn't, you say, I can't believe this, that I can't be loyal to this person. I really believed in the beginning that I could. But there's been so many disagreements. I've been dissatisfied for so long. And then we had this conversation. Then this event happened. Then this took place. And you know what? It's not my fault. Actually, it's all their fault. And they need to deal with their own stuff. But I'm not willing to stay and deal with it any longer. And sometimes you need to walk away. And that's what lastly it is. It's dismissed. And I'm going to say this is failure. It may not be failure on your part if you decide to walk away, but it will feel like failure because you couldn't make it work. So failure is not seen as a negative, it's just a fact. I remember many times I've actually been involved with this with a client where the client would disagree, wouldn't share any of their frustrations. All of a sudden they said, oh no, we can't do what we say what we can do. And then they leave our program and we had no clue what happened because they never communicated anything along this whole path. So if you are disagreeing with somebody and you don't verbalize that, it's your fault. You can't have internal conflict, and it will not be processed properly if you don't externally communicate it to the person that you're disagreeing with and having the problems with. If you're frustrated because you're dissatisfied in your job or with another person and you don't communicate that, it's not their fault, it's your fault. So you have to be mature about this and actually do something about it before you go past the point of no return. Because once you've made up your mind that this is never going to work, then really you're already on a slippery slope. You will not be able to go back up that slope again. You can't go back after you've made up your mind. So, when you are dismissive with somebody else, because you've already made up your mind that this is not going to work and you're now at this fourth phase, it means no matter what they say or do, they won't be able to convince you to come back over here. You have actually dismissed them from your life. And some people need to be dismissed. You see, some of you have actually been here for a long time with an organization or a person, and you have actually stayed here. You're stuck here. You actually can't go and come back to a new phase with a new person because you're stuck here. If you have an employee, a follower, who actually is not where they should be, and you know that you should let them go and you haven't yet, you're holding the space for somebody new to come along and try to actually work with your company and take it to the next level. If you're in a relationship and you've already mentally and emotionally dismissed the person and they can't say or do anything to rebuild your trust, you've already dismissed the person. It's time to leave. So this is where business fails over and over and over. The person says, oh, I can't let that person go. What are they going to do? What about their family? How are they going to pay their bills? And what they do is they keep on people that shouldn't be there. And it becomes toxic to the organization, in which we'll talk about in part 2. So these are the 4 phases of conflict, and you're going to find yourself in conflict with people in these 4 different areas throughout your whole life. Because you could be right here and disagree with your spouse, and it's good you could actually work through the topic and be fine. You could be dissatisfied with your church and decide it's not going to do anything anyway, and you get over this point and you're going to say, I'm going to go find someplace else. You may work for a nonprofit and you say, you know what, I've actually crossed this line, but I'm coming back over here because I know there's a way to fix these frustrations. And you could be a business owner and decide, you know what, every time I've hired a person that's been the wrong person, I'm tired of doing business. I want to go work for somebody else because at least I get a paycheck and I don't have to worry about being an entrepreneur with all the problems. You see, wherever you're at on this, you're somewhere in conflict. Now, let me share something with you that's extraordinary. If you are in constant conflict, there's a chance you're the problem. You see, if this happens every once in a while, then that's okay. But if you say this, why am I constantly in conflict? I want you to write down a word, please. It's a very, very important word. This is called a pattern. P-A-T-T-E-R-N. What is a pattern? I keep finding the right people to have conflict with me. So if you're in a constant state of conflict, then you need to ask the question, are you the one causing the conflict? So there's 2 areas that I want you to write down. This first one is personal, and the second one is professional. That means that some people have actually no personal conflict whatsoever. Everybody that they know in their life, personally, their whole life, they've got no conflict. They get along easily with people because they've already called out the people they don't get along with. Now, if that's your family, you can't really do anything about it. But for the rest of them, if they don't have any personal conflict, they may have a lot of professional conflict. That means when they go out in the marketplace, everywhere they go, they seem to find problems. They got people with their suppliers, with their vendors. They got problems with their customers, with their staff, with their drivers. It doesn't matter who they seem to meet, they have a problem. And some people have the same with their personal life. When they go home, all they got is personal problems, which is why they want to go out in the marketplace and work more so they can be away from the house more. Now, the more personal and professional conflict you have, the one word that you need to remember that you're going to have is the word tension. Tension. The tension level in your personal and professional life based upon the amount of people personally and professionally that you have conflict with will raise exponentially the more people that have a problem with you. So if you have a pattern of attracting people into your personal and professional life that create conflict for you, you will always have a high level of tension wherever you go. That's why so many people, when the tension gets too great and there seems to be everywhere they look around them is filled with conflict, they will pack up and move away. They will say, I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. And they leave because the tension became unbearable. You see, many business people, that's what they do. When their tension is too high in their business, they say, you know what, I think I want to sell this thing. I want to escape from it. I just want to get rid of it because there's too much tension for too long and it wears them down. And if you can fix this conflict, you can actually help people to become very wealthy with their own business and they're going to love it, but you got to fix the conflict internally and externally. Hopefully by now you're thinking a little bit differently about your personal and professional life and how much tension you have in it, because that's what conflict is all about. So let's take a look at some of the confusion that surrounds this. So we have to understand the basics of conflict before we can go into some of the more advanced principles that we're going to talk about in part 2. So some of the confusion is this, is when should an individual use one or more of the conflict styles that we're going to be talking about? How do you know when to use the right conflict style? So we're going to be talking about 5 different conflict styles that you can actually use in this model. You can use them personally or professionally. And if you use the wrong one with the wrong person, it's a disaster. When you use the right conflict style with the right person, it works out very effectively. As far as I know, there's only a few people that love to go around and make people emotionally upset. And those people hopefully are not in your personal or professional life. Number 2, what happens if the conflict turns personal? So we talked about on this page right here about provocative conflict, that what happens if it actually goes from being mental, now all of a sudden it goes into emotional. And the 5 conflict styles, we're going to be talking about actually how you deal with the emotional conflict, not the mental. The mental is how good you are at brainstorming, at thinking about new ideas. You can work on that on your own time. But on the 5 conflict styles, we're going to be talking about how to emotionally cope with other people, and that's what we're going to be discussing. Next, how does conflict begin between 2 individuals, which we just discussed with provocative conflict? It goes from being in disagreement mentally to now being in disagreement emotionally. That's how it goes from professional to personal. And then why is conflict important in the life of a business, which we also discussed on how to create provocative conflict. Okay, let's keep looking at the confusion. The first fill-ins, it says this: conflict can begin when both parties desire the exact same person, place, or idea. The fill-in is person, place, or idea. So here we have 2 individuals, and they're the best of friends. 2 16-year-old twin brothers, best of friends. They've never had one major argument almost their whole life, until, unfortunately, Mary comes along. And when Mary comes along, all of a sudden, Bob and Fred are very unhappy, because Bob and Fred like Mary. And since there's only one of Mary and she's not a twin, they've got a big problem. And here's a conflict. Whenever you have the same person, idea, or place here in the middle in which 2 people want it and only one person can get it, then there's going to be conflict. So this issue of desire actually creates conflict. So let's say you're out looking for a brand new car and you find the perfect car, and it has the right wheels and the right shine and the right glitter and everything is perfect with the car, and you love the car, and you come along and you drive it, and when you bring it back you say, I'm buying the car, and the person says, oh, I'm sorry, the last customer right before you just bought it, and we don't have anything like this in the whole country. It was actually imported specifically. This is a once-in-a-lifetime car. How do you feel? Well, I'm gonna overbid them. No, I'm gonna buy it. I want the car. Why? Because now all of a sudden your desire creates conflict when there's one. So let me ask you a question. What are the key desires that you have had in your life that has created conflict in your past? What are the key desires that you have about your business that has created conflict within your team? What are the key desires in your personal life that have not been fulfilled that creates conflict in you and you bring that into the company. You see, you can't say that conflict in the home doesn't affect the business. It does. And the business affects the home. So if you've got conflict in one or the other, your cash flow will go down on one of these two sides, or maybe even both. Number two, conflict can also begin when both parties are driven toward two equally opposing visions. So you have two people in the company. Let's say you have two leaders in the company, which would be a disaster, just like if you had two managers. And let's say this leader says, there's the vision. There's where we want to go. And everybody's excited until the other leader says, no, this is the vision. This is where we're going to go. And everybody gets excited. And now you have a conflict of interest because this leader's going that way, that leader's going that way, and nobody knows where to go. Now, guess what you have? Internal conflict within the organization. So, you need to be clear what your desires are and where you want to go, and be unified in them, or you will create conflict within people. So, when conflict is not solved within a reasonable amount of time, and you have to figure out what the word reasonable means, the results can include sleep, food, and health issues. When you first start up your first company, you lose sleep. Why do you lose sleep? Because you've never done this before. And if you're a new entrepreneur, you lose a lot of sleep because you don't have life experiences to tell you what you should and should not do. So all of a sudden, you try to sleep at night and you can't fall asleep at night, and then you all of a sudden wake up in the middle of the night with a whole bunch of lists that you didn't get done yesterday. And you get up at 3 o'clock in the morning because you just woke up and you have to get back to work. And you don't sleep good night after night after night because of the stress and the tension creates conflict in you because the conflict actually hasn't gotten solved. What needs to be solved? The personal and professional tension needs to be relieved. So if conflict goes too long, people's sleep usually is affected. So either they'll sleep for long periods of time or they won't sleep enough. The same thing with food. Some people are sympathetic eaters, so when they get underneath a lot of stress, they eat a lot of food. Other people are the exact opposite. When they get underneath a lot of stress, they just don't seem to be hungry. And lastly, people have health issues. The body is meant to have a good amount of stress. That's called good stress. That's healthy stress. But negative stress is emotional conflict that is not resolved. And when that happens for too long, your health will begin to suffer. You'll get sinus issues, you'll get health problems, you'll get hormonal issues, you'll get sick, you'll get the flu. Why? Because it's amazing that when people have too much stress for too long, their body will say, I've had enough, I'm getting sick. And so will yours. You're not meant to go long term with conflict in your life. So, if you want your business to run well, you need to stay healthy. Sleep good, eat good, exercise. You can't do that if you're underneath too much stress. So decrease your stress, find the conflict and solve it so that you can have a healthy life and have a healthy business. When individuals mentally disagree, emotions can create an atmosphere of tension. Now, this atmosphere is remarkable. If you've ever walked into somebody's house and you felt like, wow, there's a lot of tension in here. I can tell this house isn't happy. Or I can tell there's been a big fight this morning. Well, that's what it is. And you can walk into businesses and feel the same thing. So when there's been a lot of tension in between Bob and Fred, eventually what there is, no matter who's here, there's tension in between them. And people can feel that tension. That tension can actually be felt in products and services as well. So if there's a lot of tension in the organization and you send your best salesman out in the marketplace and he just had a huge argument your sales manager had with one of his salespeople, and the sales manager goes out to make a big sale, he brings that tension and stress with them, and therefore, guess what? He may have a hard time making the sale because he's bringing the tension with him. So that tension then is in between people, and it can also be created in the environment. And we're going to talk more about that in part 2. Misunderstanding usually flows from miscommunication. Misunderstanding usually flows from miscommunication. Now, here's what I love about our managing partner in South Africa. His name's James Rice. James is the exact opposite person of who I am. We're a perfect fit. I am a dominant influencer leader, and he is a steady, cautious manager. I like exciting breakfast foods in which numerous animals have died. And he likes gruel called oatmeal. And everything that we are in every way, we're exactly the opposite. In all of our mindset, in all of our methods, everything we do is the exact opposite, which makes us a formidable team. And so many times, James and I have had disagreements, and we've talked about things and we hash them out until we recognize something. That my definition is not the same definition that he has. You see, a lot of conflict is actually created in between people because they actually haven't defined the terms of what they're saying. So before you actually get upset with somebody else, usually it's because there's been some kind of miscommunication. And that miscommunication is because the terms and definitions have not been clearly delineated, and you take those apart and say, oh my goodness, this is your definition? This is my definition. Now I understand why we disagree. We have two different definitions of the same word. You know, this is so true with where our company is also located, not just in Chicago, but also in South Africa. So many times as a white upper class American, I would say something and people would look back at me and just kind of give me that funny, quirky look. And I would say, oh no, I just spoke something American. I didn't speak it English. And therefore, many times I would have to define, wait a second, let me define what I mean. And then I would define it. The miscommunication and misunderstanding would go away and everyone would laugh because then I would understand and they would understand that we had two very different perspectives. So, the conflict that you currently have with the number one person in your life, have you taken the time to ask them what they really think and why they think that and to define the terms with them? If you do, you may find out actually that there's been a whole miscommunication this entire time and you've misunderstood that other person because you didn't take the time to understand where they were coming from. So take that time. All right, so let's talk about the 5 conflict styles now. This is from Blake and Moulton in 1964. They came out with these 5 styles, which are just phenomenal. We're going to spend a couple minutes on them. These are not negative styles. None of them are negative. We're going to talk about them, they're all positive. The first one is, at the bottom, is the word competing. Competing. And competing is a good style when one person wants to go one way and they're completely sold on it, and another person wants to go another way and they're completely sold on it. Sometimes you're not supposed to work with others. You're supposed to do your own thing. And if you say, I'm not real sure about this, then go join somebody else. But if you're 100% sure you're supposed to go this way, don't ever back down. It's not wrong to compete. Competition is healthy, but you need to be 100% clear that that's what you're supposed to do and that's where you're supposed to go. If not, somebody can help you decide to go and follow them, which is maybe what you should do. So if you say this is the business I'm supposed to be in, and until I am proven otherwise, I will never think about going anywhere else in my entire life, then guess what? You will not be able to delineate from going in this direction because you will say this, my vision is that way, and if you don't want to go that way, that's okay, you can go your way. And that's not a negative thing. It's a competing way of disagreeing with someone. Sometimes you're not meant to actually change your belief. You're meant to go where you're supposed to go. Number 2 is the word compromising. So here's a person with a really dynamic, exciting vision, and I'm going this way. And as I'm starting to go this way, I'm actually recognizing that what that person's doing over there is actually pretty cool. I'd like to join them in that. And instead of going this way, I kind of make a little detour and I come over here and I join them. And I'm excited about that because I'm excited about their vision. So in this instance, compromise is not actually about character. It's about your core belief system about what you should be doing. So many times I've compromised in what I was doing because I felt what that person was doing is more important at this moment than what I was doing. And let me go help them. Number 3 is the word avoiding. Avoiding. Now, this is not going to be seen as a negative. I'm not talking about running away from the problem. I'm talking about giving yourself enough time to cope with the experience that left a negative taste in your mouth and actually come up with an action plan of how to fix the problem. So if I'm upset with somebody, I'll say this, listen, I need a day or two to actually work through this and let me get back with you. I'll call you on Wednesday at 12 o'clock. Will that work with you? Why? Because I don't want to sit there and stew about it. I want to figure out what I want to do, but I don't want to react. I need some space to process. Number 4, well, I'm accommodating because I actually don't have anything that I'm doing right now, and you have something pretty exciting, and I'll come join you. And sometimes you don't have anything going on in your life, and there's no reason to be competing with somebody else. You just want to go join them. So you can use these in your organization and in your personal life whenever you want, and you need to learn how to use them for your benefit of how to help others and decrease the tension that you may have in your life. Collaborating. This is the belief that what I'm doing is so important. Oh goodness, what you're doing is so important. Why don't you come help me with my thing for a little while, and then I'll come help you a little while with your thing. Now, as long as both individuals, their motives are pure, and they put a time limit on it, then it's going to be fair. So you say, listen, come help me for 90 days, and then I'll come and help you for 90 days. And that way, as that happens, you can go across and they can help you and you can help them. And what this does is it actually creates synergy between both people that could have had conflict and makes it where everybody gets what they want, which is actually part of the last part. So, whenever you're in conflict with someone, there's one fact that can make the difference between damaging a relationship and deepening it. And the factor is attitude. So your attitude about conflict, if you say conflict is negative, conflict is emotional, I just want to run away from it, you're actually going to have an attitude of surrendering to that conflict, and you're not going to become stronger because of it. Your attitude is the key in conquering conflict in your life. When we come back in part 2, we're going to be talking about some of the intricacies in your organization and how to eradicate conflict so that your organization will be more motivated and will produce more, because that's what the executive coaching program is all about. Welcome to part 2 on conflict resolution. In this second session, we're going to be talking about how to evaluate the impact of unresolved conflict. We talked about how to resolve some conflict by using the 5 different styles. And what we're going to talk about now is actually what the 4 personalities typically do with these 5 different conflict styles. So let's take a look at some of the content. When you remember about DISC, you remember that there's a dominant, influencer, steady, and cautious, which we all know this because of the DISC analysis that we took. So here we've got our DISC. We know that on this side is the task, this side is the people, and here we have the dominant, so the high D, the dominant. And this dominant person tends to be in a competing role. So they constantly compete in the marketplace. When you have an employee, a follower in your organization that's a dominant person, you want to constantly be telling them that they cannot do something. And the reason why you do this is because they have a competitive nature which is ingrained. So the moment you say to me, well, David, I don't think you can double the company's revenue this next year, is going to be the moment that I show you up. So what you want to do is you want to take your salespeople and say to them, we have a big incentive. We'll see who really gets it. And you will watch people who are dominant go way beyond what they could have ever imagined because they love to compete. I mean, you can even see this in the playground with little children. Let's say you have 2 dominant little girls. Do you know what they're going to talk about? Who can get to the fence the fastest? They're going to be talking about who's better, who's faster, who's smaller, who's taller. No matter what it is, they make it into a competition. And that's true with adults today. If you have 2 competitive ladies, they're going to always talk about who has done more in the marketplace than the other one. in our 4 personalities, we've got the dominant that we just talked about, who is big into competition. Then we have the influencer, which remember is on the active and also the people side. Then we have the steady, who is also on the people side but is more passive. And then we have the cautious. So just like we talked about the 5 different conflict styles, the first one was competitive, which is your D. The second style is a high I, or an influencer, is compromising. These people can get talked into doing actually numerous things without them even knowing it. So if you're an influencing person, be careful that you don't just go around influencing other influencers to come and join you. You want to make sure that you are actually joining the right people on your team and bringing them onto your team. Don't influence other people that are not supposed to be on your team. So use the correct style with who you're talking with. And then avoiding, which is going to be your S. So your more passive people person tends to really shy away from conflict. And these people are naturally avoiders. And now, I have known many high S's that if the intensity level of the tension gets too high, and let's say it's in the work environment, you'll find them taking their sick days. You'll find them finding that they're looking for another job because the level of intensity of that tension actually causes steady people to even avoid people even more. And if it becomes really severe, they'll leave the company over having one bad experience with somebody else. And then a high C is typically accommodating. They actually like to look at everybody, they assess where everyone is at, and how can they actually help them by administrating what needs to be taking place. So these are very accommodating people. They like to help people to become more excellent in their roles and what they're doing for their business. And lastly, in the center is collaborating. You see, it doesn't matter what personality you are, when you have a team, you have to collaborate together to actually accomplish the vision that you're seeking out to accomplish. This is one of my favorite quotes about introverts. It's when introverts are in conflict with each other, it may require a map in order to follow all the silences, nonverbal cues, and passive-aggressive behaviors. So when you have these people in conflict, try to figure that out as soon as you can. All right, let's talk about some of the definitions. The first one is this, is in a negative sense, when two people compete, they actually both lose. So let's say that this person is going in this direction and another person is going in that direction, and actually they're supposed to actually accommodate each other and help each other out. What happens is this, is when you are going in this direction but you actually should be helping that other person, you lose out on an experience of a lifetime. So when you compete, if you're doing it needlessly just to be stubborn, you're going to miss out on an opportunity that you could come over here and accommodate this person and actually help them with their vision, learn something brilliant to bring back to your own. So don't compete just because you want to be difficult. Compete because you actually make the decision based upon a value system that you know you need to be doing that. But in this negative term is that if I do this and I don't do this, I can't help this person, and therefore I can't take this idea and bring it to my own company as well. So that's a negative way. This is the definition: to strive to outdo another for acknowledgement, a prize, supremacy, or profit. Is to engage in a contest, to compete in a race, to compete in business. Now, when you think about it, in the negative sense, let's say there's another company right here that also provides executive coaching and business consulting. They have a dynamic motivational speaker, and this person who's the owner comes to me and says, David, I'd like to partner with you. Let's form a big company together. If I don't even look at the option, I may actually lose out on a great opportunity that we could take both of our companies and make it massive together and actually impact more people and help them in their business. So don't compete unnecessarily. Compete with a purpose. Number 2 is compromising. One wins to the other's detriment. So let's talk about what compromising is. So let's say you're doing this, and you really should be doing this. This is your 100%. You should be competing. But what happens is this person is really motivating. And they say to you, come, follow me. Come do what I want you to do. And you should be doing this, but what happens is you get talked out of, maybe even manipulated. doing what you should be doing, and you come over here and you join this person and you're helping them, and then you say, but that's what I should have been doing. Why am I doing this now? And you actually got manipulated to do this when you should be doing that. So compromise in this instance is negative. So avoiding, this is when one unknowingly wins and the other knowingly loses. Okay, now we're talking about the negative. So let's say I'm actually having a competition with a competition going that way, and then I lose on that one. And then I have a big conflict with this person here. And the person doesn't know I'm in conflict with them. They've said or done something, but I haven't actually told them that I'm upset with them. This person is clueless that I'm actually going out of my way to stay away from this person because they don't even know what's going on. And so I'm going around this person. I see them in the hallway. I go a different hallway. They can't figure out what's going on. That's negative conflict because you're not resolving any of the issues. So one unknowingly wins. This person is winning. There's no problem with them. This problem's with me. So I'm going to lose until I come and solve the problem. So it's to prevent from happening, to avoid falling. So what's the right thing to do? It's to come and talk to the person and say, listen, you said or did this, and I was offended at it, and I'd like to talk to you about it because I'd like to resolve it. Why? Because if you're not mature about it, it will stay there, and it will constantly eat away at your momentum and take your mind away from what you're supposed to be doing, which is solve the problem so you can actually grow your company. Accommodating. So the individual with the greatest focus wins, and the other as a support. So this is actually to accommodate, I love this, to accommodate a friend. When I asked James Rice to come be our managing partner in South Africa, he asked me, David, what will I be doing? And I said, I'm not sure. We'll figure it out as we go. And he said to me, but I already know what I'm doing in my job. And I said, I know. And he says, what am I going to do with you? I said, just come be with me. I need somebody to come help me grow the business. Yeah, but what does that look like? I don't know. We'll kind of figure it out as we discuss. And we'll draw up a business plan, and we'll talk about a strategy, and we'll figure out what your job description is maybe in the first 5 months. And so what happened was, as we worked together, and he was actually extremely accommodating to me to help me, now there's things that I help him for and I accommodate him. So when you think about in the future, when you have a conflict with somebody, ask yourself the question, what could that other person need that you have to offer? And lastly, collaborating is when both individuals knowingly win. So we actually want to work together to do my vision so we can turn around and help you to do your vision. And that's one of the best types of ways to actually ask yourself the question, with the person I'm having conflict with, how can I help them in their situation? What can I do? What can I say to help them in their conflict? Let me see if I can come help them first. You know how many times I've solved somebody's problem, which was significant, and I helped them first, and they came over here and helped me solve my problem. You see, many times people need to see that you put your first step forward, and you say, you know what, I'm going to leave what I'm going to do, and I'm going to come over here and help you. And hopefully if I help you, when it's time, maybe you'll come and help me. That's a great way to do business. The people to fear are not those who disagree with you, but those who disagree with you and are too cowardly to let you know. And hopefully you have the people in your life that will let you know when they actually have a conflict with you. There are 3 principles in a man's being in life. The principle of thought, the principle of speech, the principle of action. The origin of all conflict between me and my fellow man is that I do not say what I mean and I don't do what I say. So let's look at some conflict resolution, about the difficulty behind the conflict. Why is it so difficult actually to solve these problems? And what we're going to talk about is some of the key issues about why conflict resolution is such a challenge. And here's what it is. What undermines effective conflict management practices? So the first one that I want you to fill in is something called a personal agenda. Okay, so let's talk about this personal agenda for a moment. So we're going in this direction, and there's conflict along the way. And the person finds out that actually I'm not there on behalf of the organization. I'm there because I have a personal agenda. I'm bringing things here to get my own way. How do you think about that person when it comes to conflict resolution? You see, if I say this, I'm in with both feet, we're going to make this happen, we're going to make it big, and that is your agenda. Then when there's conflict, guess what you do? I'm going to solve this conflict with the person because I've got everything in this. This is extremely important. You see, you never want to enter into a relationship with a client or a friend or a partner unless you're in it completely. Because when the conflict is there, if you're not in it completely, you're not completely committed, you will not work through the conflict. So number one, don't have a personal agenda. Come with an open hand and say, how can I serve you? Number two is a lack of finances. Okay, do you know that there are top 3 areas of why people get a divorce? Do you know in the top 3, finances is in those top? So in the top 3, financial lack, the issue of finances, the stress and the tension. If you have a lot of problems in your company with finances, you will have a lot of problems with your people, with your followers. For instance, if you say to everybody in your company, you know what, I think for the next 6 months I'm not going to pay anyone. I think I'm just going to keep all the money in the bank. I wonder if you're going to have any conflict with your team. So when you think about conflict, sometimes finances actually exacerbate the problem, because if you have emotional problems and then you add financial problems to it, it even compounds the problems that are already there. Now, this is an important one, that terms and definitions are not clearly defined, and we've talked about that, but boundaries is a really important one. They have not been previously established. Now let's talk about boundaries, because this is why a lot of people have conflict and they don't understand this. What is a boundary? Here I am. Here's a topic. There's the boundary. The boundary is, I want to talk about this topic up to these 4 edges, and that's all. Now, if you do not understand about boundaries, you're going to have a lot of internal conflict with a lot of people. People will cross your boundary all the time, coming into and talk to you and having all kinds of fun with your boundary if you don't know that you have one. And if you haven't communicated to other people that this is my boundary and they cross it, you're upset with them and they don't know why. So my first point about boundaries is this, is that people have conflict because they don't know where their boundaries are. So number one, where? Where are your boundaries? Where are they personally and where are they professionally? Because if you don't know that this is where the line is of your boundary in this area, then how on earth are you supposed to tell somebody else that it's there? So when you have these boundaries all the way around this topic and you say, this is as far as I'm willing to go, I'm not willing to talk to anybody about this topic, this is a private issue, and this is my boundary. Then when you tell somebody, see here, this is my boundary, then if someone crosses it, you say, now wait a second, I've already shared with you, I'm not willing to talk anymore about this area right here. I've already established a boundary with you, which means once the person respects that boundary along with other people, you don't have any conflict about the topic. So if you have a lot of conflict in your business because people are talking about a whole bunch of things they shouldn't be talking about in your business, it's because you have not established the correct boundaries to protect your company from conflict. And what will be accomplished through a possible mediator? Every once in a while, you will have, hopefully not very often, but you'll have 2 people and they just can't solve the problem. On TV, this is called Judge Judy. They have all kinds of television shows, and there's somebody here in the middle. This is called a mediator. And this mediator says, okay, this person's going this way, and this person goes this way. It's amazing that when they talk about 2 very different things, but it's the same picture. But it's very different. And this mediator right here in the center will have a conversation, and they will help them to try to reconcile the problem. So if you believe that this relationship is worth saving, then sometimes you need a mediator to help save it. Whatever the case may be, whoever you're currently in conflict with, May you find a way to turn that conflict actually into an opportunity for you to build loyalty into that person. Sometimes it's not worthwhile. Sometimes you need to walk away from the conflict and the person, but sometimes you need to save that relationship. And you need to make the decision based upon the conflict curve, where you're at on that, where you want to go and how you want to get there. Lastly, the mentality is usually an either or rather than a both and. Okay, when you think about conflict, you usually say this: either I can do my vision or I can do your vision, but I can't do both. And I'm not willing to sacrifice this in order to do this. And that's how most people think, and therefore, guess what? They create conflict when it's unnecessary. For instance, I lived in South Africa for 7 years. There's a chicken restaurant there called Nando's. It is by far my most favorite chicken restaurant in the world. It has peri peri sauce, which is second to none. And therefore, on a Friday night, I would be really tired, and I would just begin to crave my glands, my taste buds. I'd start to drool for a quarter chicken meal, mild peri peri leg portion with chips and a Buddy Coke. And I would say to Katie, honey, do you feel like a quarter chicken meal, mild peri peri leg with chips and a Buddy Coke? And she would look at me, she'd say, no, not again. And in my mind, it's either or. So either I'm going out to get Nando's or I'm not going at all. And so she would say to me, I would really like Kentucky Fried Chicken. Don't you feel like those 7 original spices fried up perfectly, crispy on the outside, juicy on the inside? Can't you just taste that chicken? And what would happen is, instead of me being really upset that she didn't want Nando's, I would go to Nando's Chicken first and get my meal and drive to KFC and get her meal. And do you know, we would sit there on the couch, watch a movie, and I'd eat my chicken, she'd eat her chicken. And we were both happy. Here's my question. What are you willing to do to keep your customers and your team satisfied? Are you willing to get what you want, but you can also help them get what they want? You see, a lot of conflict is because people say, well, why do you have to be so selfish? Well, it's not selfish, it's self-interest. You can have self-interest, but you also need to have the self-interest of your team. You need to do both and. You can, with conflict, be in conflict and not lose the relationship. You can have your Nando's and your KFC. So, the key to effective conflict resolution appears to be trust. If I trust my board of directors, if I trust my managing partner, if I trust my employees, my followers, if I trust my customers, then when something happens, I actually don't screen or pre-qualify what they're saying to me. I actually just believe it because I trust them. And that's a great way to do business, is based upon trust. Conflict is alleviated so many times if you trust your people. If they're not trustworthy, you're going to have a lot more conflict because you're going to be following up with them and micromanaging them because you don't trust them. And that brings us to part 2 of this thought, was while trust is not necessary for small or short-term transactions, it is vital and must be the foundation for larger and long-term partnerships. Right now in Chicago, we have just signed a contract for a long-term partnership, business consulting with a downtown organization. And if you saw the progression of how the decision was made between our company and their company, you'll find that it was hours and hours talking back and forth, testing motives, believing up front that they were pure, testing methods, talking each other, asking for a proposal, asking a couple more questions, and then it was done. And the bottom line is, even though there's a signature on the bottom of the page of the contract, the bottom line is we shook hands. We believe the best about their company, and they believe the best about our company. Because you don't want to actually take on a significant project if you don't trust the people up front. Because what's going to happen is you're going to doubt what they say, and you're going to doubt what they do. And when you are in that frame of mind, you're going to spend more time, and it becomes exhausting, wondering whether or not they really mean what they say? Are they going to really do what they said they're going to do rather than actually getting the job done? So my encouragement to you is ensure that the staff members you bring on board are people that you can trust. Don't take on a client. Don't take on a customer you cannot trust. It will frustrate you, and you'll spend more time trying to figure out if you can trust them rather than trusting them up front. Don't create conflict that is unnecessary. This third part about trust is that complete trust allows both parties to refrain from judging the other's motives because they believe that they have their best interest at heart. You see, a lot of conflict actually is around this issue of motives. You see, how can I trust you if I think your motives are impure, which means it's going to create internal conflict with me? Did I make the right decision? Did I make the right partnership? So our encouragement to you is to do the following. Make sure that you've got the right boundaries up, that you have the right people in place, that you are excited and you can trust the people that you're doing business with, and therefore your conflict is minimized. And that makes for a very exciting business. Part 4 on trust is if one or both of the individuals lack trust, not only will they seek to gain an advantage, but will also try and protect what they have currently. Trust is easily broken and can take years to regain. If I trust the people in my organization, when I get a brilliant thought, I can share it with the people because I know they're not going to steal it. I know I can trust them with it. But if I don't know that I can trust them, I'm not going to share the idea with them because I'm afraid they're going to do something with the idea that's not in my best interest. So think about all the contracts that people have signed but still broke in the end, because in the end it's all about trust. And if the person wasn't trustworthy before they shook your hand, then what do you think a signature is going to do? Either they're trustworthy or they're not trustworthy. So let me share with you about this idea about purposefully breaking trust when the conflict isn't worth it. Every once in a while, we will have a client slip through our radars who actually is unethical. And it's not something that we enjoy, but I remember one time we had a client and someone came to me privately and shared some information under the table that revealed to me that one of our clients was doing some unethical practices. And I talked with our managing partner, James Rice, and said to him, James, there's a couple ways we can do this. I believe I'm supposed to do it this way, but it's going to make us look really bad. I'm going to push the person out of our coaching program. It's going to hurt their personal feelings. They're going to talk bad about us in the marketplace, but I cannot have an unethical client to create conflict with the rest of our clients that goes directly against our value system in our coaching program. And that's what I did. I took their fee, and in 1 month I doubled the fee. And they got all upset with me, and they left our coaching program. And I was so thankful that I created the conflict and broke the trust because it protected all the other clients that didn't even know what had happened. Even today, this person is still negative in the marketplace against myself and our company, but here's what I do know. Sometimes it's worthwhile purposely breaking trust to protect your company, your clients, and your staff. Don't create conflict unnecessarily, but sometimes the only way you can actually have integrity is to create conflict. So, what is the impact of unresolved conflict? What could be a few negative potential results for the organization if conflict is not resolved in a timely manner? This is the most important part of part 2, and what we're going to be looking at now is what happens if there's conflict inside the company and it is unresolved. You see, when we talked about dispersonalities and you talked about the dominant person who actually charges in and creates conflict at times, and then the influential person who likes to talk about conflict a lot, the high S that usually you can't find them if you mention the word conflict, and the high C which analyzes conflict to death. Then you have all 4 personalities in here, and what we want to talk about is what is your role when it comes to conflict inside your company, and how can that impact your company? So let's take a look at the notes. Here what we have is, here is your company. This is your entire company here. And the first part is your environment. the company's environment. When you walk into the back of your retail store, you meet with your people, that has a certain feel. That is the culture and the climate of your organization. That feeling is called your environment. And we're going to talk about how your environment is actually impacted by conflict. Here are your followers. Here are your employees inside your organization, and you're at the center. That's you as the leader, as the owner, as the entrepreneur, as the COO, CEO, whatever your title is. If you're in some form of management or leadership, you're at the very center of this. And what I'm going to share with you now is a very important aspect. What happens when this goes skew? What happens when there's conflict, and what happens if you don't do anything about it? So let's take a look. So here's the conflict. This person right here, it becomes negative. We don't know why this person became negative. They might have had something happen at their house. Maybe their dog got run over by a truck. We don't know what happened, but they came to work in a very negative space, and something happened. They actually had a huge conflict with another person in their organization. Now, this wasn't a little tiny problem. This wasn't a little conflict. This was a massive conflict, and it eventually turned into something until one Friday afternoon at 3:14. Here's what happened. These two people got into a major argument, and it turned very personal. It turned very nasty. It turned ugly, and they both left before 5 o'clock p.m. They left work. And so they got in their cars and drove away fuming at one another. When there is a significant crisis in your life, that creates a memory. That memory is a picture of something called trauma. When that trauma takes place, you actually have that photo of that experience that comes back over and over and over again. It's a repetitive thought. So you actually stew over it the whole weekend. No matter what you do, you could be shining your shoes or washing your dog or painting the house. But you know what? You'll find yourself coming back and thinking about that because it was a traumatic experience. It was a memory because of the conflict. So it wasn't just a conflict. It was a conflict at a certain frequency that created a memory in you that you cannot remove. It will hound you until you do something about it. Now, as the center person, as the leader or the manager, when you see this, you say to yourself, "Ooh, that's really bad. I hope that my two employees, my two followers, deal with this over the weekend. I hope that they text or SMS each other and work it out. Maybe they'll WhatsApp each other. Maybe they'll call. Maybe they'll Skype. Maybe they'll FaceTime. But I hope that they will. By Monday, this will be better." And that's a wonderful thought, but it rarely happens. Now, if this trauma is not dealt with on Monday or Tuesday the next week or Wednesday or Thursday, and let's say it doesn't get dealt with at all, this is what happens. These two people who are at odds get larger in their level of negativity. And that conflict actually creates a conflict in the organization. And it actually spreads a little bit to two other people. And this next part of conflict is called transference. Transference. They transfer their negativity to another person. So they come and they say this, "You know what? I can't believe this person did this to me. Do you know what happened 6 months ago? I'll never forget that Friday at 3:14 in the afternoon when we had this huge argument," and they will tell this person, and this person goes and tells this person, and this person tells this person, "Do you know what happened on that Friday at 3:14? That person's such a jerk. They did this, 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 this. They haven't apologized. They haven't come back yet." And the next thing you know, every single person in the organization becomes negatively impacted, and there's internal conflict because there's not been any resolution. The trauma is transferred through communication. If these two individuals that had this traumatic experience, this memory that they made that's negative, if they never spoke a word about it, communicated, they never emailed, texted, didn't say anything to anybody, the rest of the organization would not have been impacted. But because they told other people became negative. And what that does is that actually creates a toxic environment. So when you walk into this company, you feel actually a little bit sick when you walk into it. Man, the people here can't stand one another. You can just tell. You can feel it. And people can walk in and say, "Oh, I'm so glad I don't work here." Yeah, why not? I don't know. I'm just glad I don't. I can tell that people here they can't stand each other. Why would I want to work in a place that nobody likes each other? And there's only one person at fault, unfortunately, and that's you. If you're the executive, if you're the business owner or the leader, the question is what did you do to solve the problem? Because the center person here that can solve all this is you. It's your company. You're the COO. You're the CEO. You're the president. Whatever your role is, it's your responsibility. When there's a challenge between two of your followers, you are to get in the middle of it and you are to solve it because you care more about the company than what their problem is. You do not allow this company to be tainted and toxic because of the problem of conflict between two people. If you truly care about your organization, don't turn away from the problem. Run toward the problem. On Monday morning, you're going to sit them both down and say this: listen, I'm the business owner of this company. I care for you both deeply. I know that this happened on Friday afternoon, and by the time we're done with this meeting, there'll be no ill feelings. Therefore, if we have to sit here all day before we figure it out, we're not going to leave. If we have to order lunch in, we'll order lunch in. But by 5 o'clock, you will both be on the same page again. Otherwise, you need to start looking for another job, because I will not allow you to sabotage the company's future and taint what we have here because of your issue that you had on Friday. So let's get down to the root of the matter. What was said? Let's talk about it. How did that make you feel? And deal with the problem. I don't care what your personality is. If you're in a position of a leader, a manager, a business owner, executive, you cannot run away from this traumatic experience these two people had, or you do not care about your company. If that means you got to drink 5 cups of coffee before you come in on Monday morning, then drink 5 cups of coffee. It means you got to eat a whole jelly donut, or 4 of them. Eat 4 donuts. But whatever you got to do, you cannot let on Monday morning things slide and hope they just deal with themselves. They will not. You have to stop it. So if a company is toxic, look at the leadership. They're the people that you can blame because they didn't step in and solve the problem. So, if I really want to challenge you, here's my question to you. Who is the number one person right now that is causing your personal or professional environment to be toxic? And what have you done to solve the problem? It's our belief in you that you will rise up regardless of how uncomfortable you are and solve the problem, because that's what your team needs you to do. And they need you to be the person that you say you are. A leader or a manager, a business owner or executive who takes authority and responsibility over the trauma and fixes the problem. So there's 3 steps to a toxic organization. We just talked about them. Number 1, the trauma is created by the intensity of the conflict. If it's a little conflict, it won't be traumatic. If it's a huge conflict, you'll never forget it. It's traumatic. Number 2, the transfer is caused by the emotions in the communication. If somebody said, hey, you know what, Bob and I had a little bit of an argument on Friday. It wasn't that bad. You know, we just disagreed a little bit. Nobody will remember that. If you walk in on Monday morning and say, man, I can't stand Bob. Do you know what he said to me on Friday afternoon? He said this and this and this. What am I doing? I'm communicating with my emotions with a level of intensity that people are not going to forget. So, number 1, the trauma is created by the intensity, and the transfer is from your emotions and your communication. Lastly, the toxicity is cultivated by the abdication of leadership. So if you walk away from the scenario hoping it gets better, it will create a toxic environment. Great quote, happiness is a byproduct of function, purpose, and conflict. Those who seek happiness for itself seek victory without war. Some of the happiest people I know today in business are the people who had the most conflict when they started. Conflict causes you to make up your mind what you want to do, where you want to go, and what team you want to bring with you. And when all those issues have been solved, you find happiness in the midst of that. That's a key point in the executive coaching program. Just a couple reminders. I want you to make sure that you take some time over the next 4 weeks and fill out the individual project that we have prepared for you there in your notes. Secondly, if you're in the platinum level of the executive coaching program, please remember that you're to bring 3 sheets of paper with you every time you come to the group session. The first one is your book review. You read a book every 30 days. It's 10 pages per day. So please stay at that and stay committed to that. This will revolutionize your business acumen and your business knowledge. Number 2, 1 HBR article every single month. Just go on HBR.com and you're going to look for Harvard Business Review. The different articles based upon the topics of conflict resolution. Find a 5 to 7 page article, skim it over, come up with a couple sentences that you think that it will help you in your future. Bring that page with you in the next group session. And lastly, interview 1 other client of the executive coaching program. Ask them the questions on that form that we've given to you that you can help them and how they can help you. Lastly, conflict is a naturally produced phenomenon when 2 people's personalities or ideas collide. Conflict does not equal disrespect. Disagreements, even heated at times, do not lead to a breach in relationship. How you disagree is equally important as to what the disagreement is about. As we continue to serve you as clients of the executive coaching program, it is our role to create, at times, personal and professional conflict in your life. But it is with a pure motive, and it is with the belief that if we create the correct conflict, that actually the right concepts will be produced out of that. You see, if we help you to create conflict around your organization, and you find out that your vision needs to be tweaked a little bit, your strategy needs to be revolutionized, your marketing or your fundraising, your revenue needs to go up, and we create conflict around those, and we solve those problems through that conflict, how will you feel at the end of the year? You see, many of you right now today, you say, I want to double my revenue, but I don't know how. It's through conflict. And it's going to be an exciting process. We're looking forward to serving you in this next year.